Next. In our experience of running youth kiawas, we get a lot of trolls littering our comments with the suggestion that women enjoy many privileges and therefore have it easier than men. How do you counter this? Well, I'll outline a couple of so-called privileges that women allegedly experience and refute them chronologically. The big one we always seem to get revolves around the court bias against fathers when it comes to child custody. In the United States, for example, something like 80% of the time, mothers will be awarded custody over the fathers. The existence of this, in an isolated view, definitely has the appearance of a privilege. But when examined with the big picture, namely, that women are the caregivers, housewives, and men are the money makers, it really isn't surprising that the court system would hand custody of a child over to the mother. The courts have this patriarchal view that fathers are inherently incapable of caring for children in the same manner that mothers care for them, because mothers are biologically wired to stay at home and raise their offspring. But this is hardly based off of some matriarchal, female privilege. This is what is known as patriarchal backfiring on men. Wow, this is right out of some Orwellian nightmare. So a system which privileges females, and is supported by feminist groups like Now, isn't actually female privilege, but actually male disadvantage. Wow! I don't believe that we live in a patriarchy in the West. So therefore I can't believe in the term patriarchy backfiring, which is just a tool to dismiss male issues in any case. But let me play devil's advocate for a moment. Let's assume for the sake of argument she is 100% correct, and we live in a patriarchy, and the court system favoring mothers is in fact patriarchy backfiring. It still does not change the fact that it is female privilege. Regardless of whether you believe in patriarchy theory, gynocentrism, or whatever, it is a privilege afforded to mothers based on their gender. Therefore, it is female privilege, no matter how you try to redefine it. But she is so entrenched into her ideology that she thinks female privilege can only exist under a matriarchy. Wow! Next. An argument that frequently evolves out of this custody contention is that women take everything from men when it comes to divorce. Again, this is an example of the patriarchy backfiring. The reason being because, 1. Women on average get paid significantly less than men do for doing the same job, which is taken into account by the court systems when they make their rulings. Actually, no. Women do not get paid less for doing the same job. That has been illegal for the last 50 years. They do however on average earn less, due to factors like choice of career, and hours worked. If women want to earn as much as men, on average, then they need to choose higher paying, typically more dangerous work, and work longer hours including overtime. Here's an idea. Maybe the family courts should give shared custody to both parents, and allow women to focus more on their careers, so they can earn as much as men. Oh, hold on, feminists are against that. Next. And, 2, because the woman is seen as this fragile being, made only to care for children, the man is still expected to provide because that is his role, according to patriarchal precedent. Patriarchal precedent supported by feminist organizations like Now. Presumption of Joint Custody/Shared Parenting for Minor Children, March 2005. The National Organization for Women, New York State, Incorporated strongly urges the Assembly and Senate of New York to oppose this legislation. This bill seeks to create the statutory presumption of joint custody for all minor children whose parents are no longer married, so that both parents can continue to share in the responsibilities and duties of the children's upbringing. Shared parenting is defined as the award of custody to both parties so that both parties share equally the legal responsibility and control of such child and share equally the living experience in time and physical care of assure frequent and continuing contact with both parties, as the court deems to be in the best interests of the child, taking into consideration the location and circumstances of each party. The assertion that shared parenting is in the best interests of minor children is on its face untrue and is directly contradicted by the body of academic research on the subject, as well as the disastrous experience of California, one of the first states to adopt this experiment. Now, a leading feminist organization has been pushing these so-called patriarchal precedents for decades. Next. A third argument I hear, read, is that women are the ones that don't have to sign up for the draft. Firstly, I foresee that changing very soon due to the fact that women are now gaining more access into combat-related career fields within the armed forces. If she thinks women will be added to the draft anytime soon, or ever, then she is fucking delusional. The left-wing progressives would go nuts, claiming it a form of female oppression and abuse, and no doubt indisputable evidence that we live in a patriarchy, all the while ignoring that males are already forced into the draft if they desire to vote. And the right-wing conservatives would do a fantastic job of white knighting. Personally, I think the draft should be scrapped altogether. But if you are going to have one, then it should be mandatory for everyone. Next. Secondly, women, being viewed as weak, were not permitted to enlist, let alone get drafted, for hundreds of years by many armies because they were seen as incapable of properly handling the equipment needed to wage war. It wasn't that they were incapable of handling the equipment needed to wage war. But there are two factors. The first is physical strength. Typically males are stronger than females. That's why typically we segregate sporting events based on gender. And as many combat roles require a high level of physical fitness, obviously, on average, males are more suited. This is particularly true when it comes to roles such as infantry. But, I did say many combat roles, not all. With the modern-day army, there are many roles other than infantry. Some combat, some support. The second reason is that due to the female reproduction bottleneck, traditionally women have been seen as more important and protected, while males have been seen as more disposable. To put the female reproduction bottleneck in simple terms, women are limited to one pregnancy at a time, usually only resulting in one child after 9 months of gestation, while a male could impregnate multiple women over the same time period. In other words, an egg is more rare and valuable than sperm. But in the modern Western world, with an abundance of food, clean drinking water, sanitation, and modern medicine, we have a high population rate. Reproduction is no longer a high priority for our survival. So the concept of females being the protected class, and males being the disposable class, is no longer relevant. Therefore, if you are going to have a draft, both males and females should take equal responsibility for the protection of their nation. Next. Although, since we are on the topic, I must point out that the vast majority of the men who make these assertions are the same men who exclaim, women shouldn't be allowed to serve if they can't do pull-ups. And here we have a classic example of a feminist misrepresenting her opponent's argument. There is a physical requirement for both men and women in the military. And some roles have more of a physical requirement than others. Let me stress, these requirements are for both genders, and are there for a reason. If a man is 5 foot tall, or overweight, or has chronic asthma, it's highly doubtful that he's going to pass the physical requirements necessary. And it would be irresponsible to allow him to pass if he cannot meet the minimum requirements. It would be dangerous to him. It would be dangerous to his fellow soldiers. And it would lower the overall effectiveness of the military. The requirements are there for a reason. And anyone who meets those requirements should be allowed to serve, male or female. What is of concern, though, is when those requirements are lowered exclusively for females. A recent example was a female firefighter, who after repeatedly failing to meet the requirements, was given a pass based on gender. This could easily result in the loss of life. If she is incapable of dragging someone from a fire, then she is not fit to do the job. And let me stress, there are women who have met these requirements in the past, and are actively working as firefighters. Not everyone is capable of doing every job. It's just a harsh reality of life. Hey, I'd love to go into space, but I simply don't meet the requirements to be considered. The vast majority of people don't. If you don't like it, take it up with Mother Nature. But, there are many jobs in the military. Many roles to play. And although all of them require some degree of fitness, they don't all have the high requirements of frontline infantry. but let's look at her statement again. It reads, "Women shouldn't be allowed to serve if they can't do pull-ups." I would think this statement is pretty self-evident. If someone, male or female, can't do pull-ups, how exactly are they meant to carry their gear, their weapon, and be an effective fighter? It's kind of like saying, someone shouldn't be a taxi driver, if they are incapable of driving a car. Or maybe a better example would be, a blind man shouldn't be a taxi driver because he cannot see. Let me put it simply for you all. If you don't meet the requirements of a job, and you are capable of changing yourself, either through improving your fitness, or further education, or whatever, then do so. But if you will never be capable of meeting those requirements, no matter how much hard work you do, then I'm sorry, but it's time to consider a new career in a different field. Your desires don't trump the requirements of the job. And sometimes circumstances are beyond your control. It might suck, but that's life. Next. Honestly, I find that a lot of these complaints have more to do with patriarchy backfiring and requiring men to fulfill nearly impossible, if not oppressive, obligations to uphold this twisted normalcy society has constructed. Once again, I really don't care if you call it patriarchy backfiring, or whatever. It's still female privilege. Oh, but I forgot, in her mind female privilege can only exist in a matriarchy. What a fucking joke. Next. Are EMRAs only concerned about heterosexual men? What harmful stereotypes about men does it promote? Where does this leave trans men, differently abled men, other non-normative men, the genderqueer, a gender or neutral people? In my time in dealing with EMRAs, they are 100% concerned with the struggle of privileged men and not people of other gender identities. Just a couple days ago I had an EMRA troll torment one of our supporters because in his words, feminists have to make everything into a gender issue, so, of course, he and other EMRAs didn't care about trans issues. Wow. Look at that. Hearsay anecdotal evidence that may, or may not have come from an EMRA. Clearly that must represent every EMRA everywhere. Funny thing is, I just saw this interview in my feed about half an hour ago. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but might include some of it at the end, post-credits. The Honey Badgers also recently did a show on trans issues. And as most of the issues we talk about include all men, those issues automatically include trans men. It's not only privileged white straight babies being circumcised. How you would even determine whether a newborn baby is straight or gay, or trans or whatever is beyond me anyway. But I can guarantee you, there are no doctors refusing to circumcise a male baby, because it's transgender. This issue, like many, is not confined by race, sexuality, or gender identity. It affects men across a wide spectrum. Now it is true that we don't spend a great deal of time talking about the specific issues affecting trans men or women. Just as the NAACP doesn't spend a great deal of time talking about issues that affect trans men and women of color. Does that make the NAACP anti-trans? Of course not. There is one group though that is anti-trans women. Can you guess who they are? I'll give you a clue. It starts with radical, and ends in feminists. I may have made that a bit easy to guess. So it's ironic, and hypocritical, that EMRA accuses us of not caring about trans issues, while ignoring the radical anti-trans feminists in their own ideology. But of course, this is all just a huge distraction on their behalf. Instead of actually dealing with our arguments, they create and attack bigoted straw men. Typical. Next.